going and connect you with the political home. Before we start the next panel, I just want to say again, thank you to the conference organizers, to our security team. Please give our security team a hand. Security team, thank you again to the conference organizers, Ear Doctor and the tech team. We are so appreciative of you, and to everybody who is still rocking with us. Y'all ready to hit this out of the park for the last panel? Are we ready? I think you're ready. There's going to be a lot of energy on this panel because your panel moderator brings the energy, and also these panelists are going to bring the knowledge with the energy. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Amiri Banks of Community Movement Builders, who will be moderating this panel.
All right, hey folks, thank you so much, Kiana. I appreciate that. If y'all don't know me, my name is Amiri Banks. I'm sure y'all are exhausted. We're gonna try to keep the energy up, but also be efficient so that y'all can get some rest. So with that being said, today's panel is titled, "What is the role of students and youth in revolution?" And I just want to start by quickly saying something that I've observed today is that this is a very intergenerational group we have here. We have people who represent, the full spectrum of humanity and life experience. We have babies, we got the youth, so to speak. We have elders and folks all across the life who have various life experiences. So that's something that I think is incredibly valuable and that is essential to understanding sort of what revolution actually entails. Revolution is not just a bunch of, people who are in one particular period in their lives trying to accomplish things with the means that they have. It's them looking out for their elders, and it's them looking out for those that come after them. So that's all I'm going to say because it's not about me. I'm just a moderator. What I'm going to do now is introduce the panelists and hear their thoughts on the value of youth and the value of, or maybe the lack of value of schools and education as currently constructed in this society for the purposes of liberation, because we know that schools currently are not constructed for liberation, but rather to miseducate people and to misdirect them and to actually train them to participate in systems that are harmful to them and that are violent to them. So that's my little 2 cents. And on that note, our panelists here are a number of esteemed and educated individuals. So first I'm going to introduce Rukia Rogers. Rukia is originally a native of Wisconsin and has worked with young children and their families for over 20 years as a preschool and toddler teacher, as an atelierista, which I didn't know what that was. I had to ask her. She told me an atelierista is a studio teacher. She is also a curriculum coordinator for the Clifton School, and she has been inspired by the educators of Reggio Emilia, Dr. MLK, various Black Panthers, Bettina Love, and many, many others who saw education as a fundamental right as well as a catalyst for social change. Next, I want to introduce Camille Harris. Camille is a PhD candidate at Georgia Tech in the Interactive Computing program, and she is interested in research that is at the intersection of race and technology, focusing largely on fairness and accountability in natural language processing, social computing, and human-computer interaction. And Camille is also a member of CMB. Next, I want to introduce Salifu Mack. Salifu is a Pan-African socialist and member of BAP, or the Black Alliance for Peace, the AAPRP, and the Low Country Action Committee. The Low Country Action Committee is a Black-led grassroots organization dedicated to Black liberation through service, political education, and collective action in the Low Country of South Carolina. And last but not least, I want to introduce Rafiki Morris, who is an accomplished painter, poet, muralist, writer, public speaker, graphic designer, and Pan-Africanist revolutionary organizer, who currently serves as the organizer for the All African People's Revolutionary Party and has been doing that since 1974, and is an organizer for the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde, a coordinating committee member of BAP from 2020 to the present, and a co-chairperson of the Maryland Council of Elders, director of the Perry School of Art Center, and has written many books, including Africa on My Mind Poetry, Call of the Drum, The Philosophy of Conscience, an African worldview, and war, the blood in our eyes. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the panelists with a question. And the first question is, it's pretty simple. What do you think, what are your initial thoughts, I suppose, on how we can support the youth, whether that be youth who are participating in these institutions that we know are violent and that we know are rooted in a history of anti-Blackness, or the youth who are not participating in these institutions? So people who are not in school or not going to these colleges and these universities, or are being educated outside of the mainstream capitalist system. So how can we support, love, empower, and uplift our youth so that we can help them help us to achieve liberation together? All right, I'm gonna be quiet, y'all. And anybody can go first.
I can go first. So I think, thank you for the introduction. I want to offer up something a little bit different. In my context, I work with very young children. I'm the founder director of the Highlander School, which is a preschool. We work with young children from 6 weeks to 5 years of age. And in the context of revolution, we very often in youth, we talk in terms of high school, perhaps college students, but very rarely do we talk about the very young children. And we know that in our resistance, it's always began with children. Whether we think about residential schools or we think about other forms of oppression, it's always been about disconnecting children from themselves and for their ancestors. So in that context, I want to start with saying that ways in which we can support young children is to support communities of care. We do not have communities of care for families. We think about it, a young child, a mother's being asked to stop, for example, nursing at as young as 6 weeks because we don't have maternity leave, we don't have paternity leaves. So thinking about systems in which we can support families who are caught up in the system of capitalistic grind is the first place that I would think about how do we help young students. And then from my own perspective, reframing our outlook in school and the role of school, which the same folks who built prisons and designed prisons also designed our public school systems. So we have to, in many ways, deconstruct, reflect, and create and reimagine a new world and new possibilities for schooling and education. I believe the ways in which we can support young Black students and children is to create environments that are loving and warm and magical, that amplifies their voices to be heard and take their words seriously. Again, we think about things of children being asked to be quiet and be still and be silent. How many messages do they get as young children over and over again that your voice is not important, that your body is not important, that your thought is not important? And we have to create different types of systems. Again, as you and I had a conversation, there's so much that we do well in the Black community in terms of loving on our Black children and so forth, but we're creating different systems. So for example, in our program, we know, and I believe that children come to us as our greatest connection to our ancestors. They are spiritually connected and they have spiritual ways of knowing that in the capitalistic grind, we constantly cut and disconnect that. How can we support their relationship with earth and land? How can we create systems to support them in terms of their connection with their ancestors? In this way, in terms of movement and action, they know the essence of themselves, that they are integral parts of their community, that they know that their voice is important from the days that they are born and they are part of our community. I could say more, but
I'm really just gonna let y'all flow. So I don't want to add too much. Y'all are spitting, so I'm just gonna let y'all flow. I might have some additional questions, but please, others, if y'all have thoughts in response to what Rakia just shared. But I will say this really quickly. I definitely agree that children have a wisdom that is inimitable, and I'll just leave it at that. They have a wisdom that we really should pay attention to, especially right now.
All right, good evening, y'all. So my thoughts on this panel are gonna bounce around a little bit because the panel is about youth and students, and that category is just too big. So it's a lot of different like age groups I feel have to get addressed in that. Like I just turned 30 like last month, And so I'm in this weird place where like I don't feel like youth, but Rafiki be like, you are youth, so you need, and I'd be like, no, I can't. My students tell me I'm whack and I'm old. But so this year I started working as an English teacher at my old middle school in the town that I grew up in. Because y'all know how bad the teacher crisis is. People ask me to come and help. I'm not trained as a teacher. I'm technically like a journalist by trade, but I came in this year and I tried to do this. And one thing that this experience had really reinforced for me is that African children are the most precious resource that Africa and the African Revolution has. So we do a lot of conversation about censoring this and censoring that. Censor me, no, I'm gonna censor you. We need to censor these kids in every single thing that we do. And so to the point about effective support, the first thing I wanna say is that we need to make our spaces, and I'm talking about effectively supporting them to revolution. I understand they need to grow up and be, how do we get them in here to do these things, right? We have to make this stuff welcoming and inviting, because we have to understand, especially for me, I'm 30, I'm aging out of the like pop culture psyop target age. The mission of major media, of the schools, of the universities is targeting African youth in this country to Americanize them. And in order to do that, everything is flashy, it's bright, it's fun, it sounds good. And then here I come talking about neo-colonialism. They running. They don't want to talk to me. So I think we have to work a little bit harder to like make our spaces relevant and inviting to young people, because they're the ones who are being targeted. And even on a much smaller scale, African youth are being pushed out of our communities. We treat young Africans like criminals inside of our own communities, and it has a lot to do with conditioning and a lot of the negative things that happen in our communities. But I think we have to make a bigger effort to make our kids feel welcome where we are, because they aren't welcome at school. I'm telling you that because I'm there 8 hours every day. They're not welcome in stores. They're not welcome in their car. They're not welcome anywhere in society. So we are not developing communities where our kids can feel welcome, then we really won't get them into rooms like this after a certain period of time.
Can I add? And to your point of welcoming them, us creating our own spaces for our own children.
Is it on? Okay. I guess I'll speak more to like the college student age. I think that a good thing to do is support the student movements that's going on. I think a lot of people in university, it's the first time they're really like starting to articulate a position and like a political ideology. And a lot of it, even the students who do have more progressive or radical politics, it's always or often centered around the university. A lot of universities have a very insular culture. Like at Georgia Tech, I remember I took a social justice class last semester, and someone asked one day, raise your hand if you've heard of Cop City, and nobody in the room besides me and one of the only other Black people in the room knew about it. And there's this insular culture of, the culture of campus is separate from the culture around. So a lot of people start to articulate their political position, but it's rooted in the contradictions we're experiencing inside the university. And I think it would help a lot for other local organizations to come to these universities and show solidarity with our movements, but also connect our movements to the bigger picture so that we can see like beyond that bubble. So yeah.
Okay, I'm the old youth. I really did claim to be youth until I was 45, almost 50 years old. Ain't that right, Bamboshi? I want to approach this from a little bit of different perspective because I think we need to be kind of practical. So just by way of background, I organize students and youth on every college campus in the state of New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, and Northern Virginia. Every single one of them. And from the age of 17 until they told me, look, Rafiki is like enough. And so I kind of know a little something about college age young people. And so what I would say to you is you gotta do it. It's your job. Ain't nobody gonna do it for you. Don't listen to us tell you not to do it, not how to do it, when to do it, none of that. It's your thing. I can tell you what we did. I can tell you what we accomplished. I can tell you what we left undone. But I can't tell you what to do. And if I try to tell you what to do, you need to tell me to shut up and go figure it out for yourself what you gonna do. Now, I'm in the All African People's Revolutionary Party, right? And we're in the process of reshaping and reorganizing ourselves, and the thing came up, and well, we need a youth wing. And all them old people say, yeah, we're gonna study that. Right? No. You tell them, no, we're not gonna study that, we're gonna do that. Right? We had a lot of organizations in here over this last week, and all these youth from all these different formations, right? It ain't like it used to be. All of y'all are anti-imperialists, all of y'all are anti-capitalists, all of y'all are anti-patriarchal, all of y'all are leaning towards socialism, if not socialist, and most of you all claim to be revolutionary. You don't need nobody to tell you what to do. Do it. Do it. You're here now. You're not going to have an opportunity like you got right here, right now, to get together with each other and figure out what is the next step. So, and I'll give you one quick story that I gave to Salifu, but I'm taking it back from him. In the 60s, you had the same thing. You have a movement that is not conscious of itself. The movement already exists, but it's not conscious of itself, and it's not an organized movement. So you had SCLC, you had CORE, you had NAACP Youth, you had all kinds of youth organizations. SCLC wanted to have a youth contingent to give energy to their branch of the civil rights movement. So they called all these young people together, and they made a mistake because they gave Ella Baker the responsibility to organize them youth. And she got them all in the room, and the first thing she said to them is, y'all do not want to be under the guidance and direction of them preachers. Right? So I'm telling you the same thing. Y'all do not want to be under the guidance and direction of us old people. Right? Any action you decide to do that involves running, jumping more than 2 inches, turning quickly, I can't do that. So you gotta leave me out of that. but you can do it. So this is how I think we can help the young people. And I heard somebody today say about passing the baton, right? Well, one part of that is passing the baton, but the other part of that is taking the baton. So y'all done reached to that point. Take that baton, pick it up, run. I ain't running with you, but I'll meet you there, right? This is your responsibility. So last thing I'm gonna say, and then I'm gonna get up and I'm leaving this panel. I would like all the people in here who's 40 years or younger, please stand up. Come on, get up. 40 years or younger, please stand up. All right, now, my sister Erica got a book there. Put your name, your phone number, and your email address in the book. So if nothing else, when you leave out of here, you'll have yourself a WhatsApp chat. Right? If nothing else, right? Kwame Nkrumah told us the difference between a zone. Don't sit down yet. Don't sit down, because I got some other questions for you. The difference between a zone under enemy control and one that is hotly contested is a handful of genuine revolutionaries who are prepared to organize and act. So you look around the room, you see you got yourself a handful, right? How many are genuine revolutionaries? How many are prepared to organize? How many are prepared to act? Put your hands up. If you don't fit these categories, you can sit down. You see what you got now? You have here the difference between an enemy-held zone and one is hotly contested. Is a handful of revolutionaries who are prepared to organize and act. They're right here in this room. Last quote. Okay, y'all can sit down. Last quote, then I'm leaving because I'm out of energy. Each generation, and this is a paraphrase of Frantz Fanon, each generation, out of relative obscurity, must discover its historical mission and either fulfill it or betray it. You can do both. You can do either. You can do either one. So now, you know, you are no longer obscure. Obscure means, you know, we're not really sure who they are, you know. But now y'all not obscure. All of you stood up and all y'all know each other, right? Discover your mission and either organize and act. I suggest you put these old people out the room, get together, fuss and fight for the next hour and a half, and come up with one damn thing you're gonna do, and do that. We got your back. Thank you. I'm done.
So we have 27 minutes, unfortunately not an hour and a half, but in 27 minutes, we're gonna see what we can get done and we're gonna do it. So with that being said, I'm gonna be quiet because I wanna respect the time that we have and ensure that the panelists get to respond to what they heard from each other. One thing that I will ask really briefly is, what is it that is required of us if we're going to engage the youth, right? I think you were the one who said that oftentimes we treat our youth like trash in our communities. And I see that all the time. Once you become educated and aware of what's going on, it's a lot harder to feel like you can engage with people who maybe have not had the same exposure or political education, but in reality you can. And it starts with your family, your friends, and the people who live around you, and literally just going and talking to them and just seeing them for who they are and letting them be heard and seen and felt and to letting them feel. So that's my little second 2 cents. Turn this mic. Oh, my bad, y'all. I didn't mean to have that feedback going. All right, I'm gonna turn it back to y'all though. I guess I should have probably transitioned into a question. My question then is, for the youth, how do we help them see through things like social media, technology, colonialism that are becoming so salient and rampant in this modern age, right? Because our young elder just talked a lot about his experiences in the 60s and 70s and 80s and so on and so forth. We know the world is the same in many ways, which is very important to remember, but it's very different in many ways too. So how do we fight through all the messaging that they're receiving? How do we, in our different lanes, use our strengths to help people to realize the tools that they have to liberate themselves and those around them on a daily basis? Hopefully that makes sense.
So the question being, how do we fight through the messaging that children are receiving? So again, just to offer back my own context, I believe that truth is power, truth is love. And I think we spend a lot of time when we're working with young people, especially children, that we try to shield them from the truth. We try to not have the conversations about policing. And from our perspective and our work with young children, those have been what we call brave conversations, but not really brave conversations. They're necessary. Let's talk about what happened to George Floyd. Let's talk about why we're in the streets. Let's talk about conversations of Tamir Rice. And you may be saying, well, these kids are 4 and 5 and 3, but they're living it. They see it. They know it. So it's necessary for them to process it. And then how do we empower them? We remember after the uprising of 2020, we had children come back to school, and we were curious because we saw them in the streets, marching and thinking about messaging. And so we said, well, why were the people in the street marching? And they would say, oh, Black Lives Matter, hands up, don't shoot. But they also didn't have the information. They were only getting bits and pieces of the messaging. So this is when we had to sit down and really talk about the ways in which George Floyd's body was harmed by the police and he died. And people kind of pushed back because they said these children are young, you shouldn't have these conversations. But again, if we believe truth is love and truth is power, then in order to cut through the messages of colonialism and capitalism, you have to have what I would call brave and truthful conversations and give children the tools to make meaning of what's happening in their world. These were a group of children who were 3 and 4, and there were initially some concerns amongst the families. We want them to have a beautiful childhood, a magical childhood. And at the same time, it's important that they have the tools to navigate through media, to navigate through messaging. The children out of that particular project ended up making a mural to honor Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. They ended up having they wanted them to be holding hands underneath the rainbow. So if you came to our school, you would see that. They said, I want them to know that they were loved. They drew hearts and unicorns and so forth. So even in the process with young children, that by giving them different materials and mediums of expression, they can also help them to cut through the messaging, but it also has to be necessary for educators, for teachers to have truthful conversations and truthful information. And my concern in the country where we're at right now is a lot of pushback, whether it's targeting critical race theory and other information. We seem to be hesitant to have what I would call, again, brave and necessary conversations. Even now, our children have been actively participating in the Stop Cop City movement. And they asked us questions like, why were the Muskogee removed? Why did this happen? And we understand that they're 4 and 5, but we also felt it was necessary for us to provide them with the information. And again, multiple different mediums and different tools to make meaning of it, and for them to be part of a movement that, again, amplified their voices. And to also tell them that folks lie, that there's propaganda. So that's from our own context of how we're offering back and perhaps being co-conspirator with the children to cut through the messaging from our perspective.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer this question from the perspective of like us, those of us in the room who Rafiki said we young people and we need to sign the paper. Guys, I have a lot of things I want to say right now. I'll have to say them very quickly. We need to really focus on developing strong organizations. And the reason why I say that is because I'm a Pan-Africanist, I'm always turning my eye to Africa. I just feel like that is where the answers and the solutions are for African people, no matter where we are. And when we look at the revolutions that have happened in Africa, we look at places like Guinea-Bissau, for example, with the PIGC. Those organizations all have really strong youth wings. First of all, they were organizations that were built by the youth. The PIGC is continuing to have successes to this day, and it remains in the hands of the youth. But before we can talk about that, I think we have to look at the lessons that African organizations have taught us, that this idea of preparing ourselves is like a two-way street. So elders have to be ready and willing to provide mentorship and guidance and infrastructure, but young people, and this is something that we struggle with, and we're gonna have to do some real self-crit about this right now, are gonna have to be willing to discipline ourselves and accept structure. This is one of the biggest downfalls that we are having in movement building right now. The first thing, we have to learn how to struggle. Because we are coming from the capitalist, colonialist sort of arrangement of things in this country, especially if you went to university, you have been conditioned into like the gifted and talented, individualistic, my way is the right way, I have the right ideas, and the first time somebody doesn't listen to what I have to say, I gotta go. It can't work, because it was so many people that came up here today and was like, we at war. Everybody's like, yeah. Well, how you at war if the first time something don't go your way, you done with the struggle? We did that heavy in 2020. We did that heavy in 2020. And it partially, I'm not into the essentializing thing. So Rafiki really loves young people. I'm into whoever has the right ideas, right? Okay, 2020 came, our organizations were not prepared for the influx of young people who wanted to join them. Everything went virtual because of COVID. So there was already structural issues that existed in our movement. But on top of that, us young people, we came into these organizations and these movement spaces and blew up everything that we didn't like, with no plans to correct or fix or salvage or repair. Everything became Twitter threads, Medium post call outs, Instagram slides, harm, abuse, conflict, everything was getting conflated. We blew up a movement in like 3 years. The FBI didn't really have to do anything. So I'm just saying, like, I really love how much faith that the elders have in us in terms of being prepared and taking the baton and all these kind of things. But a part of discipline, and I've learned this through the party, like the Black Alliance for Peace and the AAPRP have really disciplined me and helped me understand everything has to revolve around a constant process of criticism, self-criticism. We have to be able to look at the things that we're doing wrong and adjust. And I feel like that is a key difference between a lot of the youth-led movements that we see in Latin America and the Caribbean and on the African continent and what we're dealing with here. We're not assessing, we're just imploding and moving along to the next thing, imploding and moving along to the next thing. At some point in time, we're gonna have to discipline and commit and really sit with the things that are wrong and say we wanna fix them.
The question was about combating like social media, online narratives, and I guess I would emphasize the importance of political education. I think, and social media and these things, like, you know, our movements can't be on social media or can't be on, you know, webinars. But at the same time, for the average, you know, Gen Z, they're probably going to first, like, that's a chance to reach them. That's the chance to first initially reach somebody who's not politically educated, who's not engaged with the organization. And so we have to be able to use it as a tool where appropriate. And I think that's really important for engaging the youth and combating the other narratives that's on social media, because these alt-right, these fascists, like, they're on social media propagating their message. And what are we propagating as well? So I think there's a panel on propaganda tomorrow too. So yeah.
I think something that, if I could try to synthesize or respond to what I've heard so far, a recurring theme I'm hearing is that we as quote unquote youth, whatever that definition might be for you, have to be able to show up every day and actually have a conversation about what it is we're trying to do, as opposed to responding to some sort of imagined ideal of what revolution looks like, or what radical Black liberation looks like, or what African liberation looks like. Because there's lots of theorizing, but when you actually sit down in a room and talk to people, or you go out in the streets, or you go to the hood and you sit down and talk to people, it's a completely different conversation. And so I guess my next question is, what does accessibility look like, right? Because a lot of the language that I see on, when I'm talking, I got 3 little siblings. One of them is 16, one of them is, 2 of them are 18, they just graduated from high school. The way I talk to them, completely different from how I might talk to people in this space, completely different from how I talk to my elders, right? But I'm trying to find a way to make the ideas and thoughts and the facts I have that I want to share accessible. And I also see that hand, and I'm glad you put your hand up, brother, because you know what I just remembered? We got to get out of here very soon. So I do want y'all to be able to ask questions. So this is my last question. If y'all want to briefly respond to this, and then anybody else that has questions, I would love for us to engage with those. So thank you for raising your hand. I got you, and I got you too. So yeah, how do we make it accessible, I guess is my question.
Accessibility. So everybody likes to joke and laugh and make jokes at people we call cultural nationalists, right? But I think one of the things that they understand is that culture is a weapon. And I think that when we're dealing with young kids, first of all, let me back up and say, the students that I teach, they're middle school aged. So they're 13, 14, 15 years old. And a great deal of them cannot read. That's just what African youth are dealing with in this country. I don't know if y'all talk to y'all younger cousins or nieces and nephews and stuff, but I know my kids are not unique in this experience. Somehow they made it to 14, and when they look at words on paper, it's not coming together, right? So as much as I like to talk about political education, I think we have to get a little bit imaginative. One of my mentors, Obi Egbuna Jr., he uses the power of plays and music, songwriting, poetry. We need to reclaim these things. My comrade Erica actually wrote a piece on Hood Communist recently about what is Black culture. I think we have to go a long way in terms of redefining culturally what is us and what is the CIA, because I think we're at a point right now where we can't really afford to be heavily invested in cultural products that we cannot use for education, about who we are or what the status of our people is. And kids really respond to that stuff. I've had a lot of success using cultural products to get through to people who are younger than me. In the meantime, while we work on addressing those issues of literacy and that lack of political education, culture and political education can begin to go hand in hand, in my opinion.
All right, y'all, in the interest of time, I'm gonna try to take some questions. I can probably just run because I'm young, you know what I'm saying? So, I got you. I think I saw.
Thank you, brother. I really wanted to appreciate what I heard Brother Salifu say earlier in his comments about there being no place where our youth is welcome. I was very moved by that because it's an important, insightful point. And what it made me think about was when we first started organizing workers in the South, and it was very hard because people just weren't used to organizing as in their workplace or whatever. And there was no place they could go where they were welcome. Even in some of the churches, when there was a problem, you know, then the response would be, well, y'all can't be challenging that man's business. That's his, you know, so there was a mindset that had to be changed. And one of the things that we did, we built some relationships with key ministers, you know, around the area where we were organizing. But we had to establish our own institutions to serve the interests of the Black working class. And so one of the things we organized was a workers' center, the Abner Berry Freedom Library and Workers' Center. We talked about that a little earlier today. But that was a place where workers could go to meet, you know, because white workers in a lot of those jobs, they couldn't go to their own churches to meet with other workers to deal with, you know, concrete problems they were having. The only place they could go to was to the Black community. But we felt that the Black community needed its own working class institution. So we established a workers' center where workers could come to meet. They had control over the center, you know, to hold meetings in a safe place and to begin to organize and address, you know, the different challenges that they face. So it made me think maybe that's a way that problem can be somewhat addressed in some of the things you're seeing, you know, establishing youth centers that's outside of the, you know, institutional structure of the schools, but where the community, getting some key community people and ministers to support, but building our own institution, youth institution in the community so that there is a place where our children are welcome. And so I thought it was just an insightful comment and something that, you know, intergenerationally, we need to share these type of experiences. What's really going on, what from our experience may be applicable. You know, you always got to test things in practice. But I appreciated that and a number of other things I heard too. But I don't know, I just wanted to mention that to see if it might be something to consider.
So I didn't realize that, I don't know if he was actually a part of the panel or not, but I just heard him say something really interesting about how he feels like he has to talk to the folks within his household a little bit differently about the work that we do than they do with like elders and folks actually in the movement, right? I was just wondering like if folks could maybe describe that feeling again before I realized he wasn't really a part of the panel. Kind of describe that feeling and you know how that shows up. Because honestly, to me, it translates into a lot of us being kind of scared or not knowing how to navigate introducing this work where we come from, right? The hood, whatever, your little neighborhood, right? So I'm just wondering if folks could kind of describe that feeling for me.
I guess I'll try for my perspective. I mean, I think a lot of the time it comes to connecting it back to something that's important to that person. So if you're talking about people you have personal relationships with, your family, your friends, you know what's important to them and you know how to, you can connect that back to our oppression and the contradictions we're experiencing under this capitalist system. And yeah, I guess just trying to connect it to something that you know is important to them and making sure you're building a relationship so that, or if it's someone in your family, someone or your friend, somebody you already have a relationship with, so that it's coming from a trusted person and that they know that you know where they're coming from. So they can try to understand where you're coming from and relating it to what they care about.
I don't think we should look at it as being scared. I think we should look at it as being strategic. You gotta know, you gotta be able to read the room. I feel like that's what we gotta learn how to do, is learn how to read the room. It's some places you're gonna be able to walk in and be like, the ontological terror of the state police, and then people gonna understand what you're talking about. And then there's some places where you gotta go and just be like, fuck the police. You gotta know how to switch it up. And it's not being fake, it's just being smart.
I agree with that. I just thought of it as strategic, a range of people that you're communicating with, what you're going to say to a 6-year-old versus a 7-year-old, making it contextual and making it meaningful for folks, and being relationship based.
Hello, okay. Hello, my name is Sam. I'm a student organizer in Arizona. I use he, they pronouns. Thank y'all for taking the time to talk. And as one of the youths or the youngins, I do have a question regarding, because one of y'all made an analysis regarding the 2020 organizing scene and the youth behavior during that. What are the specific lessons you learned regarding the general lack of nuance and analysis that took place, and what are some ways that we can more constructively combat some of those issues within organizations that we don't like versus just tearing shit down without reconstructing anything?
All right, in the quickest way possible, this is what I would say. Inside of our organizations, we need to be involved in ongoing processes of political education, where your organization has a set list roster of things that you are reading together. You need to be engaged in a back and forth discussion about the things that you are reading. You also need to be having a steady and constant meeting schedule where you are practicing criticism, self-criticism, which is the practice of either criticizing yourself or criticizing others with the intent of resolving an issue at the beginning or the end of every meeting. And the organization needs to be committed to practicing democratic centralism. These three things in heavy rotation will help us begin the process of, everybody was in here talking about New African, I think Rafiki was talking about the revolutionary African personality. All these things will help us to begin to develop individually, and it'll help us show up better in our group dynamics with each other.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm gonna make it brief. So kind of similarly in that vein, what has y'all's experience been with conflict resolution in terms of groups internally? Because similarly in 2020 in New York, we found a lot of lack of basic conflict resolution skills, literally imploding a movement that took a decade to build. How have y'all experienced folks seeing conflict as a necessary part of growth and not as harm? Because as was already discussed, that kind of gets conflates in ways that are very two-dimensionalizing. So thanks.
Quickly, I just feel like we need to be proactive about these things. So if you were in Onye's breakout group about not just bodies in the back, she was discussing the process of the AAPRP evolving our line on gender analysis, and the process that people had to go through to build a more progressive gender analysis in the party. One of the things that came out of that was all of us feeling like when it comes to dealing with conflict, we need to, inside of our organizations up front, have a process that kicks into motion when those things happen, as opposed to waiting for these things to happen and then being like, oh, we need to figure out what to do. That's I feel like one of the biggest lessons we need to take from 2020, whether it's, and every process may not be the same for every organization. I can't say what happens in organization A might work for organization B, but I think some across the board things are, there needs to be an immediate address to the situation. If the situation cannot be resolved quickly, the two parties may need to be separated. There doesn't need to be gossiping about the situation that happened. Only those directly involved in the situation need to be involved in the resolution of the situation, but the entire organization or circle or party should be made aware of what's happening. It won't be the same for everybody, but a process needs to be established.
Hello? Oh, this is just real quick. One of the things that resonated, I think the sister in the yellow, how do we create spaces for our children? And thinking about that as the younger generation logistically, because I think that's going to be more important to happen outside of schooling, because I feel like someone has made a calculation. There's too many of them that can read. There's too many of them that are literate, because most of us came to like these revolutionary ideas, or at least this decolonization process, this deprogramming through literacy. And so when you have things like entire cities being taken over by a charter system, which is not really accountable to the public, they can internally, because they're private, do what they want. And then I think it was earlier this year, the state of Tennessee, I think it was, got caught on tape where they were trying to plan for both rural and urban areas to take over that entire state with charter schools. So just really thinking about, someone has made the calculation that there's too many of us that can read. And so thinking about what do those spaces, how do you organize for education in spaces that are outside of the schooling system?
So I don't know how much time we have left. None. Really quickly, we have to do our own thing. We're not going to expect people or colonists to create spaces, safe spaces for our children. It's something that we have to collectively do outside of the systems that exist.
Oh, I'll just say